Rev up your engines!
Lover of Portuguese water dogs. Scotty, a quick question. My daughter overfilled her oil in her car thinking it was low. She has an 08 Saturn View. What should we do? Can it do any damage? You can either suck the extra oil out or just change it again. What happens is if you really put too much oil in, if it's a little bit too much, it can build up enough pressure. The oil seals will blow. Changing the oil seal on a crankshaft and a rear main engine seal, you got to pull the transmission. Very expensive job. So change it right away. Now, if you really put too much, like 4 or 5 quarts, you can actually bend internal parts. There's too much oil, too much pressure, it'll start bending parts of the pistons and stuff. But, just change it as soon as possible. And if it hasn't started leaking yet, it didn't do any damage. Francis Bell says, Scotty, I smell burnt plastic when driving with a Bluetooth OBD scanner plugged in. Any idea where the smell came from? Well, one, don't do that. If you got a cheaper scanner, the scanner can start melting from heat. Realize that OBD port is called onboard diagnostic port. That's why it's called OBD. You should only use it when you're diagnosing the car. Some cars even say do not drive when it's plugged in. They're not made to be driven down the road plugged in. Unplug it, but they're not made for you to drive down the road with them plugged in, which to me is rather hilarious because a while back some of these stupid insurance companies said, we'll give you a deal if you plug this in your car while you drive and it gives us the information because if you're a safe driver, you'll get better rates, right? They actually ended up destroying, God knows, untold thousands of computers probably because they were not designed for being run with that thing plugged in the whole time. So don't leave stuff plugged in there the whole time. Not a smart move. Those are diagnostic ports. They're not made to be plugged in all the time. Colin O'Dion says, Scotty, are Toyota diesel engines on pickup trucks reliable? They don't sell too many in the United States. Just the other day, I met a soldier here at Fort Campbell, Tennessee. He had just bought what's called a Toyota Hilux Surf. Basically, it's a Toyota 4Runner that they sold in Japan. He had it imported. It's right-hand drive. It's got the Toyota 4-cylinder diesel engine in it. Man, that thing still ran like a clock. Hey, it was, 1987. It was an old vehicle, but boy, it ran like a clock. They're great engines. They never sold in the United States really much, but they're great engines, and diesels are kind of on the way out with pollution and stuff, so they're never going to put much money into the infrastructure on diesels anymore for cars and trucks that passenger trucks that people drive around, but they're really reliable. Justin Manson said, longevity-wise, you recommend a Tundra or a 4Runner? Well, they're both excellent vehicles that can run a really long time. What do you want? Because the 4Runner is more SUV-ish, right? And the Tundra is a big, giant pickup truck. Ask them about what gas mileage they're getting, and you'll probably go buy the 4Runner. The 4Runner's no gas miser, but it's a lot better than the Tundra. The Tundra's a huge truck, work truck. You can drive them, I've seen them 500,000-600,000 miles on it. Original engines, original transmissions, but they're horrendous at gas mileage. The 4Runner's a little bit better. Nox Nosferatu says, Scotty, what's your opinion on a 90s Opel Corsa 4-cylinder petrol with fuel injection? All right, well, it's 90s. It's a really old car. Now, I'm assuming you live in Europe. You live in Europe, those are decent vehicles, right? In the United States, forget it. You can't get parts for those things. The first car I ever had was an Opel. GM imported them because GM had bought Opel a long time ago. I don't know, 1930s or something. They don't own it anymore, but they imported them in the United States, and they were impossible to get parts for, and it cost a fortune. But in Europe, it's another story. Now, it is a 1990s car, so it's probably almost 30 years old. You don't buy something like that as an everyday driver. Those are more toys than anything else. But they're fun cars to drive around in. Movie Time and TV says, Scotty, what's your thought on a Nissan 370Z engine? Those are excellent engines, V6 engines, a lot of torque to them. If you do want to buy one of those, get a standard transmission. Don't get the automatics. The automatics, the trannies would break all the time, cost a fortune to fix. The standards are really dependable. And of course, you could swap them back and forth if you wanted to. If you wanted to go through the trouble of turning an automatic into a standard. I've seen guys do it here in Clarksville because people like drifting those Z cars. They're real popular. They're solid built cars, Realize you're talking about, let's say, buying a used one. People rag the heck out of those things. You'd want a guy like me to check it out with a fine-tooth comb before you buy. Otherwise, you might get a pile of junk that's falling apart. Or if you want a project car and you get it dirt cheap, well, you can always get parts from all other kinds of Nissans and put it all together like my grandson and his friends do, and then either drive them, drift them, or sell them to somebody else. Philip Macy says, Scotty, weren't you impressed with the Tesla S Plaid release? I'm fascinated by the technology. Yes, I'm an educated man. I know rocket technology from Werner Braun up to modern day rocketry, right? It's fascinating stuff. Am I going to buy a rocket? No. I'm not spending that kind of money. It's very interesting technology. But do you really need a car that can go 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds? You're going to kill yourself or somebody else driving that fast. That's not for normal driving cars. These guys are all in a race of mine is bigger and faster than yours. But really, does the world need a car like that? No, it really doesn't need a car like that. Impressive technology, but I mean, just like a rocket ship, I'm not going to buy one. Asset says, why does Toyota insist on keeping the fixed axle rear suspension instead of the multi-suspension in the new Land Cruiser? That's a tried and true rear end. Guys buy those things. Some guys there going in the desert and stuff. They want something that's solid and reliable, and the ride isn't that big of a deal to them. They don't sell that many Land Cruisers. I'm surprised they're still making them. It's in to make a profit. Look at Toyota. Do they make sports cars anymore? No. The Supra is a BMW made by Germans. Their little 86 is a Subaru. They don't make it. So there's not that much profit in it. Why should they redesign something that they don't make any money? I don't blame them there. It's a business decision. They're still great vehicles, but a lot of guys want a solid rear axle. If they're going out in the desert, less things to break. It actually is more dependable with a solid rear axle. There's less things to break. They don't ride as well, but they last longer. Hunter Mensch says, Scotty, what do you think of Pontiac GTOs 2000 and older? Yeah, the older ones were much better. And you're talking about a GTO with a V8 engine. Those things are fun cars to drive in. Those are fun. The newer ones were rolling piles of junk. That's why Pontiac doesn't exist anymore. When you get a classic rear-wheel drive American car, those things were pretty good. You know, Holden sold them in Australia with the GM engines, rear-wheel drive, big V8 engines. Holden doesn't exist anymore, and the Australians that really like cars, they're sad because they like driving the things around. But those weren't bad. One of the few Pontiac, especially when you're talking 2000s and back, when GM was still making decent stuff. As far as I'm concerned, 2005, 2006, that was pretty much it for GM, and their quality just went right down the cliff. Brian Cassatt said, Scotty, what do you think of Mazda CX-5 brand new in terms of reliability and their 6-speed automatic transmissions? All right, if you don't know, Mazda and Toyota are getting together. They have a factory, I believe it's in Alabama, where they're building Mazdas and Toyotas on the same assembly line. They're sharing their technology. Mazda does their own transmission stuff and engines now. They don't use any of those Jatco transmissions that Nissan made, those horrible ones. They don't use that anymore. So they seem to be excellent vehicles. I can't comment on a brand new one because they haven't been out long enough. But the last 5 or 6 years, Mazda's gone way up in quality as far as I'm concerned. Me, I'd still buy a Toyota because I'm cheap, and I only buy old vehicles. Generally, my vehicles are 10 to 20 years old when I buy them. Then I drive them another 20 years. I'm too cheap. They are much better made than they used to be. And with their relationship with Toyota, I believe Mazda is owned a certain percentage by Toyota. I don't know if it's 20% or something, but they own something of it. Lloyd says, Scotty, what's better, a Ford F-150 2004 to 2007 or Chevy Silverado 1500 2001 to 2005? They're kind of neck and neck there because that was back in the day when they made better vehicles. I have customers with Silverados. I got a guy with a 2001. It's excellent. He only paid $3,000 for it. It's still in excellent shape. You know, and the older Fords, if you had an 04 Ford F-150, they're pretty well made too. If you can find one that isn't all worn out, or even if you can get one cheap that's worn out, put another engine or tranny in them, they're still available. YouTube says, Scotty, can JB Weld be used on aluminum parts? You can use it on all kinds of stuff. It works quite well. But here's the thing. What's the part for? It can only take so much stress. It's just 2-tube epoxy. Right? It's not like you're welding it with a welder. You can, of course, weld aluminum, you can weld steel, but you got to know what you're doing if you're welding. Now, let's say you got some part that's a cosmetic part that's aluminum. Sure, glue it together, stick it on with JB Weld. It works great. You know, it's fantastic. But, on the other hand, if you got a suspension part or an engine part, you don't want to JB Weld it together. You want to buy another part or have a good pro weld it back together. It's a super expensive part. Aluminum welding is very hard to do. You have to have an excellent welder to weld them if you're going to do aluminum welding. Realize that. It's not that easy to do with steel. It's very hard to weld aluminum. But there's plenty of guys out there that know how to do it. Sky High Gaming says, Scotty, I got a 14 Cadillac XTX with 42,000 miles. What should I do to make it last a long time? All right? Don't drive it much. Those things are endless money pits as they age. But you only got 42,000 miles on it. So who knows how long that thing is going to last. Change the oil regularly every 5,000 miles. Don't overheat the engine. You never know. They aren't that well made, but it's low mileage. So baby it. You never know how long the thing's going to last. Might last a while longer. Mr. Lopez says, Scotty, what is a Honda ULEV engine? The ULEV stands for Ultra Low Emissions Vehicle, which means it pollutes less. Honda was one of the first companies to really go into making stuff that pollutes less and gets better gas mileage. And they work quite well. I worked on one in Rhode Island when I was there. It still ran fine. The guy got great gas mileage. It was just to make them run leaner, pollute less, and get better gas mileage. And they do work quite well. Now, basically, all modern cars, you buy anything that's really modern, they're all pretty much low emissions because by American standards, they had to meet all these specs the government, the EPA put out, so they're all pretty much low-emission vehicles now. They just don't say it on the engine. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.